Hi everyone, thanks for joining me here on JKD Handmade. For this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to work up this granny square tank top. Now if it's your first time here, please don't forget to subscribe. I've gone ahead and worked up all my granny squares. I've already done a tutorial on how to crochet these granny squares. You can check the link in the description box below for the tutorial. I've worked as many as I think I need. I'll work more as I get into the pattern. For the yarn that I used a mix of cotton and polyester. This is a recycled yarn. It doesn't really say on the yarn label what's the weight, but going from the recommended hook on that label, which is a 4.5 millimeter hook, I'm assuming that this is a double knit, and it looks like to me it is a double knit, which is a light worsted or category 3. I'm going with these 4 colors for the granny squares, and then for the joins I'll be using this off-white or beige yarn, which is a similar weight to the one that those 4 colors that I'm using. Okay, so for the hook, you'll use the recommended hook on the yarn label. This is a 4 millimeter hook. And you'll use one hook throughout the pattern. Now don't forget the link to the pattern for the granny squares is in the description box below. This tutorial is just a continuation from those granny squares where I'll be showing you how to join them and then create this tank top. You will work this tank top according to your physical body measurements. So this tutorial is for everyone of any size. Now here's the finished product. I've worked in as many granny squares as need be to fit my body measurements, which is a size medium. Now we've spoken about the hook. It's the recommended hook on the yarn label, which in my case, I'm using a 4 millimeter hook. You'll also need stitch markers, a pair of scissors, measuring tape, and a yarn or a wool needle. Unfortunately, I cannot give you exact quantities of yarn that I've used. I just went with one skein of every color to work up this top. Now this is an intermediate pattern. To be honest, working up the granny squares is really easy. It's the joins that make this an intermediate pattern. I suggest watching the video tutorial and then deciding if this is something that is doable for yourself. Okay, so let's get on with this tutorial. We will be working this pattern in rounds, and within those rounds there are steps that we need to follow to join these granny squares. So we begin with round 1, and we'll start with that corner right there. Going up that corner, that will be step 1. At the next corner, that will be step 2, and then we have step 3 along the side, step 4 at the next corner, coming down is step 5, and then from step 5 at that corner, we'll join to the next corner, and we'll work our way up, and that will be step 6. At this corner, it's step 7, and thereafter, we'll repeat these steps from step 3 along this top edge. Okay, so here we have step 7 right at that corner, and then just as we worked step 3 on the first granny square, we'll work step 3 on this granny square. Then it's step 4 at that corner, coming down step 5. We'll join to our next granny square, work step 6, and then at that corner, it's step 7 again. And so the process continues with step 3, just as we had worked step 3 previously. Then it's step 4, 5, 6, and 7, and we'll continue repeating those steps until we've joined as many granny squares as need be for round 1. Now we'll work with our first granny square. Right at that corner at the bottom edge, we will attach yarn, chain 1 to secure, single crochet into that same corner. chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then turn, single crochet into that next chain 2 space. Then it's chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, single crochet into the next chain 2 space, chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, single crochet into the next chain 2 space. Continue on with chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space, into the remaining chain 2 spaces, stopping before the next corner. Now I've worked all those chain 4s and single crochets into the chain 2 spaces, and here I am at the next corner. So here I'll chain 6, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I'll single crochet into that corner. So let's have a look at it. We've worked step 1, and now we'll work step 2 at this corner. Slip stitch twice to get back into that chain 6. Make sure when you slip stitching, you are slip stitching into the chains itself and not into the space. Then chain 9. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And turn, single crochet into that same corner, then turn, slip stitch twice into the chain 9. Make certain that you are slip stitching into the chains itself and not into the space. Chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's look at it again. We've worked step 2 and now we're working step 3 along the top edge. Turn and single crochet into the chain 2 space along the top edge. Continue on with chain 4s and single crochets into the chain 2 spaces along this top edge until you are at your next corner. I've worked my way to the next corner, so let's have a look at it once more. So we've worked step 1, then it's step 2 at the corner, step 3 along this top edge, and now at the next corner it's step 4. Then it's turn, chain 6, single crochet into the next corner, turn, slip stitch twice into that chain 6, then chain 9, turn, single crochet into the same corner, turn, slip stitch twice into the chain 9, then chain 4, turn, and single crochet into the next chain 2 space. So let's look at it again. We've worked step 1, step 2 at the corner, step 3, step 4, and now we're working step 5 down this bottom edge or down the side edge. Along this edge, we're working chain 4s and single crochets into the chain 2 spaces. Continue on, work your last chain 4 and single crochet into that corner right at the bottom edge. Let's have a look at what we've done. We've worked step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and now we'll join the 2 granny squares along this bottom edge. So it's from step 5 on the 1 granny square to step 6 on the next granny square. Chain 2, So that's 1 and 2, and join to the corner of the next granny square with a single crochet. Let's look at what we've done once more. We've worked step 5 and then we've joined the corners, and now we're working step 6. Chain 2, so that's 1 and 2, and join into the chain 4 space on the 1 granny square with a single crochet. Then chain 2, 1, 2, and join into the opposite granny square into that chain 2 space with a single crochet. Now all we're really doing here is chaining 2 and joining both the granny squares with a single crochet into the chain 4 space or the chain 2 space. So again, it's chain 2, that's 1, 2, join with a single crochet into the chain 4 space, then chain 2, 1, 2, and join to the chain 2 space on the opposite granny square with a single crochet. So all you're really doing here is you're chaining 2 and you're joining to the opposite granny square into your chain space with a single crochet, and then it's chain 2 and join on the opposite side into your chain space with a single crochet. Continue on until you get to the corner at the top. Now I've completed step 6 and here I am going to work step 7 at the corner. I've worked my last chain 2 and single crocheted into that chain space just before the corner next to my chain 9. Continuing on for step 7, chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and single crochet into the corner on the opposite granny square. We'll now complete this corner, and at the same time we'll form part of this star join or flower join, whatever you may call it. Slip stitch twice into the chain 4, so that's once and twice. Then chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and join into the chain 9 space right here. Join with a single crochet into that space. At this point, you do need to place a stitch marker at this join, as this marks off the center of our stitch pattern. Continuing on, chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and join into the corner from our second granny square with a single crochet. We've now completed half of this star join. Continuing on, turn, slip stitch twice into the chain 4. So let's take a look at our next step. Following our first granny square, the next step would be a step 3 repeat along this top edge. Then it's step 4 at the corner, step 5 going down. You'll bring in your next granny square and join with a chain 2. You'll work step 6 and then step 7 along that top corner. And then you'll continue again with step 3, step 4 at the corner, step 5 going down. Bring in your next granny square, join with a chain 2, work step 6 and then step 7 at the next corner. Now you'll repeat these steps from step 3 to step 7 to join your granny squares until you have a length of granny squares. To show you once more, let's continue. It's chain 4. Now we're working a step 3 repeat, and you'll single crochet into the chain 2 space. Then you'll continue on with chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space until you reach your next corner. Just to recap where we are, if you look at it again, here I've worked a step 3 repeat, and now I'm working a step 4 repeat into the corner. I'll follow that with a step 5 repeat and so on, as I've already explained. I've continued on joining these granny squares, and at this point I have a length of joined granny squares. Now when it comes to the measurement, you will need to take this length of granny squares and fit it around the widest part of your upper body. So in my case, the widest part of my upper body is my bust. When fitting on, make certain that you are pulling on this length of granny squares quite tightly, as you do want a slightly tighter fit to your tank top. If you choose, or if you prefer a loose fit, you may measure around your widest part of your upper body rather loosely. So I went about stretching this length over the widest part of my body, which is my bust. For my size, 4 granny squares was all that I needed to fit around my bust. Once you have joined a length of granny squares to fit over the widest part of your body, we'll go ahead and join both these edges. Now I've stopped at a step 3 repeat. I chained 6 and I joined into that last corner, as you see here. So all along I worked chain 4s and single crochets, and into my last chain 2 space at the corner I worked a chain 6 and joined into that corner. Now we'll join to the start of this length of granny squares, and at the same time while joining we'll form half of the star join, as you see here. This is just to complete the pattern all throughout round 1. Let us now join both these edges. Turn, slip stitch twice into the chain 6, chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and join to the chain 9 on the opposite granny square. Here you're joining into the chain 9 space. Single crochet to join. Then chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and right here at the point where we've joined, you want to place a stitch marker marking the center or the middle of this star join. Single crochet into the corner from your last granny square. Now when working these joins, make certain that you always are orientating your granny squares correctly. The last thing you want is to have twisted chains as you work. Then turn, slip stitch twice into the chain 4, chain 2, 1, 2, and join to the chain 6 on the opposite granny square. Chain 2, 1, 2, and join again into the chain 2 space on the opposite granny square. So here all we're doing is repeating chain 2, join to our chain space on the opposite granny square, then it's chain 2, join to our chain space on the opposite granny square. You'll continue on until you reach the end of this step. I've worked my way to the end of this joining round. Here I am single crocheting into the last chain space, and I'll slip stitch into the corner from the opposite granny square. We'll now work an edging around the bottom of round 1. Chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space, chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space, chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space, chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space. Here all we're doing is chaining 4 and single crocheting into the chain 2 spaces all around this bottom edge. When you get to the end of the round, chain 4 and slip stitch into the first chain from our chain 4 at the start of the round. You can then fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. Now that round 1 is complete, we'll move on to round 2. Here for round 2, we're joining 1 granny square at a time. Once we've fully joined the first granny square to round 1, we'll bring in the second granny square and we'll continue on joining granny squares until we've completed round 2. Set up your first granny square as you wish. We'll begin round 2, step 1 at the top corner, working down the side, joining our granny square to round 1, working up the side and bringing in our second granny square. So we're beginning at the top corner, working down for step 1, then at the next corner it's step 2, the joining round is step 3, at the next corner step 4, up that side is step 5, and then we'll join from the first granny square to the next granny square, and then we'll work step 1 of the second granny square, step 2 at the corner, step 3 to join, step 4 at the corner, and up the side, step 5. Then you'll bring in your next granny square and repeat the same steps as you did when joining your second granny square. Attach yarn to the top corner of the first granny square for round 2. Chain 1 to secure, chain 4, so that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Single crochet into the chain 2 space, continue chaining 4 and working those single crochets into the chain 2 spaces until you get to the bottom corner. I've worked my way to the bottom corner. I've completed step 1 of round 2 for my first granny square. Then chain 6 and single crochet into the corner. Turn, slip stitch twice into chain 6. So now we're working step 2 to join the granny square from round 2 to the granny square from round 1 and form that star motif or flower motif. Always orientate your granny squares so that you do not end up twisting on your chains. Now chain 2 and join to the center of the star motif, exactly where we had placed the stitch marker. Slip stitch to join. Then chain 4 and single crochet into the corner into granny square from round 2. Slip stitch twice into chain 4 We'll now work step 3 and join granny square from round 2 to granny square from round 1. Chain 2, single crochet into the chain 6 space from that granny square from round 1. Then chain 2 and join to the chain 2 space on the opposite granny square with a single crochet. So again here we're chaining 2, joining to the opposite granny square into the chain 4 space with a single crochet, chain 2, join to the opposite granny square into the chain 2 space with a single crochet, and you'll continue on to the end of this step. I've continued on to the end of step 3. I've worked a chain 2 and single crocheted into the chain 6 from the granny square from round 1. Then chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and single crochet into the corner from the granny square from round 2. Turn, slip stitch twice into chain 4, chain 2, 1, 2, and join to the center of the star motif where we had placed the stitch marker. Join with a slip stitch into that center. Now chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and join into the corner from granny square from round 2 with a single crochet. Turn, slip stitch twice into chain 4, chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we're working step 5 along the side of granny square from round 2. Single crochet into the chain 2 space, chain 4, single crochet into the next chain 2 space, and repeat chain 4, single crochet into the next chain 4 space until you've worked your way to the corner. Work your last chain 4 and single crochet into the corner. We've now completed the joining for the first granny square of round 2. We'll bring in the second granny square for round 2. Continuing from where we've stopped, chain 2 and join into the chain 2 space from the second granny square right at that corner with a single crochet. Then chain 2 and join to the chain 4 space from the opposite granny square with a single crochet, chain 2 and join into the chain 2 space into the opposite granny square with a single crochet. Repeat until you reach the end of step 1. Now this is step 1. It's a joining round, joining our first and second granny squares. Now after this, you will repeat these steps to join the remainder of your granny squares for round 2. You'll repeat from step 1, then it's step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5. That would be repeated to join the remaining granny squares. Here I am working my chain 2 and joining to the chain 6 on the opposite granny square. I do need to reorientate this, otherwise I risk getting my chains all twisted. We will now be working step 2 at the corner, and at the same time we'll form our star motif. Then we'll repeat the steps, step 3 and step 4, step 5 to complete this granny square. Then bring in the next granny square, work round 1 just as we had done for round 1 and repeat the same steps to join the next granny square. Continuing on, we at step 2, it's chain 4 and join to the corner with a single crochet, turn, slip stitch twice into chain 4, then chain 2 and join to the center of the star motif where we've placed our stitch marker. Join with a slip stitch into that center. Now chain 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4 and single crochet into the corner, turn, slip stitch twice into the chain 4. Now for step 3, chain 2 and single crochet into the chain 6 on the opposite granny square. Step 3 is a joining round. All we're doing here is chaining 2 and joining to the chain 2 on the opposite side, and then it's chain 2, join to the chain 4 on the opposite side. Then we'll work the corner at step 4 and going up working step 5. Here I am continuing with step 3 to complete the joining round. I've worked the last chain 2 and single crocheted into the chain 6 space from granny square from round 1. Continuing on, chain 4, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, single crochet into the corner, turn, slip stitch twice into chain 4, chain 2 and join into the center of the star motif, right where we've marked off with a stitch marker. Join with a slip stitch into that center. Chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, single crochet into the corner, turn, slip stitch twice into chain 4, and that completes step 4 at the corner. Now for step 5, along the side edge of this granny square, chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space, continue on with chain 4, single crochet into the chain 2 space until you get to the corner. Work your last chain 4 and single crochet into the chain 2 space from the corner. Now you will repeat these steps as you did for granny square 2 from round 2 to join the remaining granny squares. Continue on from where you've stopped. Then it's a chain 2. Join into the corner from the next granny square with a single crochet. Chain 2. Join to the chain 4 space with a single crochet, chain 2, join to the chain 2 space with a single crochet, All you're doing here is repeating step 1 as you did when joining your second granny square to the first granny square. To complete step 1, chain 4 and single crochet into the corner. Then turn, slip stitch twice into chain 4. So that's once and twice. Chain 2, 1, 2, and join into the center of that flower motif where we had placed our stitch marker. Join with a slip stitch into the center. Now chain 4, single crochet into the corner, turn, slip stitch twice into chain 4, chain 2, and join to the chain 6 space from the opposite granny square. Join with a single crochet. Now we've completed step 2. Step 3, the joining round, chain 2. So that's 1 and 2, single crochet into the chain 2 space, chain 2, single crochet into the chain 4 space. Repeat until you reach the next corner. At the corner, you work step 4 and then you'll repeat step 5 just as you had done for the second granny square. And then you'll repeat these steps until you've joined all your granny squares to round 1. I've completed round 2. I've joined all my granny squares. So this is the body of the tank top. To join the first and last granny squares, all I did was chain 2, single crochet into the chain 2 space, chain 2, single crochet into the chain 4 space, and so on until I had joined those edges. Now to complete this round, continuing on from the corner that we had stopped at with working that single crochet, it's chain 2 and slip stitch into the corner on the opposite side. You can now fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. So we've now completed the body of this tank top. We'll now work the straps. Attach yarn to any of the chain 2 spaces along the top edge. Chain 3. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet. Double crochet into the same chain 2 space. Chain 2 and work 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space. So all we're doing for this round is we're chaining 2, 1, 2 and working 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space. Continue with your stitch pattern throughout the round. When you get to your joins, as I have right here, you will work a chain 2 from your last 2 double crochet into that corner chain space. So it's a chain 2 and you'll work 2 double crochets in the middle of that join as I am doing here. So that was 1 and now here's the second double crochet and then it's a chain 2 and 2 double crochets into your chain 2 space from the next corner. And then you'll continue on with your stitch pattern all the way around this top edge. So I've worked my way around this top edge, and here I am at the end of the round. To continue on, I'll chain 2, work 2 double crochets in the middle of that join. Then it's chain 2 and slip stitch into the third chain from chain 3 to join. You can now fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. We will now work the straps along the top edge of this tank top. You first decide on the orientation or the setup of your granny squares. Like here, I've got my granny squares running down the front and back, and then I've got half granny squares along the sides. And then another option would be to have full granny squares along the front and on the back. So you decide on the orientation or setup of your top the way you'd like it. I'm going with a full set of granny squares running down the front and back of my top. And then on either side of this top, I placed stitch markers like you see here. That marks off the sides of this top. And if, unlike myself, you chose a different orientation, you can place your stitch markers along the sides. If it falls into those joins, find the center of those joins, or you can even go ahead and count the number of chain 2 spaces you have and make certain that all those spaces are even between the front and the back. Now this is the orientation I'm going with. I've got half granny squares along the sides, and I've got my stitch markers in line with the center of those, or the middle of those granny squares. So now we're working the straps along the top edge. With our stitch markers placed at the sides, we now need to find center front, running straight along the exact front of this tank top. You'll mark off the exact front with a stitch marker. I use my granny squares to guide me with the center front and also the center back. So this is what I'm actually doing. I'm using the granny square itself to guide my center front and center back. Mark off your center front and center back as I've done. So here you can also go ahead and count the number of chain 2 spaces from the side to the center front or center back and make certain that they are equal on either side. We'll begin with the first strap. So starting from the side, that stitch marker, skip the first chain 2 space and attach yarn into the second chain 2 space as I am doing here. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet. Work another double crochet into that same chain 2 space. Then it's chain 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space. Chain 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space. Continue on with chain 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space until you reach 1 chain 2 space before the center stitch marker, as I have done here. Then turn, slip stitch into the next double crochet, slip stitch into the next chain 2 space, chain 3 counts as a double crochet into that same chain 2 space, chain 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space, continue on with 2 double crochets into the chain 2 spaces to the end of the row. I've worked my way to the end of this row, then turn, slip stitch into the next double crochet, slip stitch into the chain 2 space, chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and double crochet into that same space, chain 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space, continue on with chain 2 double crochets into the remaining chain 2 spaces. I've worked my way to the end of this row, then turn, slip stitch into the next double crochet, slip stitch into the chain 2 space, chain 3 counts as a double crochet into the same space, and you'll continue on with chain 2 double crochets into the chain 2 spaces to the end of the row. I've worked my way to the end of the row, then you'll turn, slip stitch into the next double crochet, slip stitch into the chain 2 space, chain 3 counts as a double crochet into the same chain 2 space, then chain 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space, and continue on to the end of the row. So you'll repeat these rows until you have only 2 chain 2 spaces remaining, as I have right here. Continuing on, turn, slip stitch into the next double crochet, slip stitch into the chain 2 space, chain 3 counts as a double crochet into that same chain 2 space, chain 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space. Now we have only 1 chain 2 space remaining, and that's exactly what we're looking for. We'll continue on with our strap. For the next row, chain 3 counts as a double crochet, then turn, double crochet into the next double crochet, chain 2, 1, 2, double crochet into the next double crochet, double crochet into the last stitch. Here you're working your double crochet into the 3rd chain from chain 3. Now this is the width of the strap. We'll continue on with this stitch pattern until the entire strap measures the armhole depth for the size that you are working. So continuing on, chain 3, turn, a double crochet into the next stitch, chain 2, a double crochet into the next stitch, and a double crochet into the next stitch. Repeat the stitch pattern until the entire strap measures the armhole depth for the size you are working. Here are the armhole depth measurements for the different sizes. I choose to go with the smaller of the 2 measurements. That way I know I'm getting a tighter fit on my tank top. I've continued on with these straps. I've worked all 4 of them, 2 at the front and 2 at the back. Basically, you're repeating the same steps to work all 4 of these straps. Now, to get the length of the strap, you do need to measure the armhole depth. I chose to use the smaller of the 2 measurements, and also I measured from that first round, the edging round. I took my measurement from that point going upwards. I worked my strap to 7 inches for a size medium. I also left long tail ends to help with the seaming. We'll now join the back strap to the front strap by seaming them together. Now that we have both straps joined, we can go ahead and weave in all the ends. Make certain to weave in all your ends into the wrong side of this tank top. All you're doing is going back and forth into your chains or your stitches. Match your colors when weaving the ends in. So you'll weave in all your tail ends, and that does it for this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.